Welcome to TerrorHawk Recap, where we dive deep into the most thrilling and spine-chilling movie stories. The movie opens with a young woman named Ellen Hutter experiencing a terrifying vision. In her nightmare, she performs a dark ritual and makes a pact with a demonic entity known as Nosferatu. The presence she summons is far beyond her control, and the ritual quickly turns into something disturbing and overwhelming. The entity overwhelms her completely, and the dream ends in a suffocating, horrifying climax before suddenly cutting away. Ellen suddenly wakes up, revealing that it was only a nightmare. Her husband, Thomas Hutter, immediately notices her distress and tries to comfort her, holding her close and reassuring her that she is safe. However, despite his comfort, Ellen remains shaken and unsettled, unable to escape the feeling that something is wrong. Thomas, aware of time and responsibility, gently prepares to leave for work, promising her that everything will be fine. Set in the year 1838 in Alamein, Thomas soon meets a man named Knock Mapler, who assigns him a business opportunity. Knock informs him about an eccentric nobleman who wishes to purchase a house in Visborg. Seeing this as a chance for financial security and career advancement, Thomas accepts the offer to sell a property to the mysterious Count Orlik. Later, Thomas returns home and informs Ellen about his upcoming journey. The moment she hears about it, she becomes anxious and warns him not to go. She confesses a disturbing past nightmare in which she was symbolically bound to death itself in a horrifying wedding surrounded by lifeless figures. Despite her fear, Thomas reassures her that it is only a dream and insists that he must go for his career. The next day, Thomas prepares to depart. Before leaving, Ellen gives him her necklace as a token of protection. Unnoticed by him, she also secretly cuts her hair and places it within his belongings, unknowingly fulfilling part of a dark supernatural ritual connected to Nosferatu. Thomas begins his journey and eventually arrives in Transylvania, where he is warmly welcomed by the villagers. However, their behavior quickly shifts from friendly to strange and unsettling, as they begin laughing in an eerie, almost unnatural manner. The village chief appears and angrily scolds them for their behavior, warning Thomas indirectly about the dangers surrounding Count Orlik. Despite the warning, Thomas convinces the chief to let him stay for one night. That night, an elderly woman gives him a cross, telling him he will need it for protection. Soon after, Thomas witnesses the villagers performing a disturbing ritual, stabbing what they believe to be the corpse of a vampire with an iron stake. The next morning, still disturbed by what he saw, Thomas tries to ignore his fear and continues his journey toward the castle. As he moves deeper into the isolated land, he suddenly notices a mysterious carriage approaching him through the darkness, adding to his growing sense of dread. As the mysterious carriage halts in the middle of nowhere with no driver in sight, Thomas gathers his courage and climbs aboard. The carriage suddenly comes to life, racing through the dark forest toward Count Orlik's isolated mansion, with wolves chasing behind it. When Thomas arrives, he is greeted by the eerie presence of Count Orlik. A voice informs him that he is late, and Orlik insists they share a meal while finalizing the deal for the house in Visborg. As they sit together, Thomas is offered wine, but becomes uneasy as Orlik dismisses his concerns and urges him to eat. During the meal, Thomas accidentally cuts his thumb, and Orlik instantly becomes fixated on his blood, revealing his unnatural hunger. Thomas realizes something is wrong, but Orlik's true nature is already exposed as he attacks him. At the same time, Ellen warns Anna about a coming danger, but Anna refuses to believe her. Back at the castle, Thomas loses consciousness and enters a dreamlike state where Orlik forces him to sign a mysterious occult contract. Orlik then takes Thomas's locket and discovers Ellen's hair inside it, confirming their supernatural connection. Afterward, Orlik gives Thomas a chest of gold, but reveals he is not free to leave. When Thomas tries to escape, he is told he must remain there. As Thomas regains consciousness, he discovers bite marks on his chest and realizes he has been fed upon. He desperately searches for an exit, but every door is locked. He eventually finds Orlik resting in a coffin in a lower chamber. Thomas attempts to kill him with an axe, but Orlik wakes up and forces him to flee. Meanwhile, Orlik performs a dark ritual using Ellen's hair, causing Ellen back in Visborg to weaken as she becomes connected to his influence. Orlik's control grows stronger, and Thomas becomes trapped under his power before being attacked again. In Visborg, Ellen's condition worsens, and Dr. Wilhelm is called as concern grows. Her symptoms appear unnatural, beyond any normal illness. Back at the castle, Thomas regains consciousness and, in desperation, throws himself out of a window into the river below. At the same time, Ellen suffers violent spasms as Dr. Wilhelm struggles to stabilize her, unable to understand what is happening. Friedrich warns that something far more sinister is happening, muttering that the devil himself is near. Deep in the forest, a nun discovers Thomas's lifeless body by the riverbank. She and the other nuns take him to a church, where they pray over him. Thomas eventually regains consciousness, but refuses to rest, insisting he must return to Visborg because Ellen is in danger. Meanwhile, Count Orlik travels toward Visborg by ship, carrying a coffin filled with grave soil and plague-infested rats. Dr. Wilhelm and Friedrich seek help from Albin Eberhard von Franz, an outcast scientist who studies the occult. After hearing about Ellen, Albin identifies the cause, Nosferatu, a demonic vampire linked to plague and death. When Albin tries to provoke the entity, Ellen becomes possessed, speaking through Orlik's voice. Albin declares she is cursed, while Wilhelm remains skeptical. Friedrich believes her condition is tied to Thomas, and Albin orders Anna to watch Ellen closely. Thomas later returns to Visborg and tells Ellen her nightmares were real, then collapses from exhaustion. That night, guards report a ghost ship wrecked on Visborg's shore, Orlik's vessel, bringing swarms of plague-infested rats that trigger a deadly outbreak. Orlik arrives in Visborg and reunites with Nock. He declares that the city will fall into dread and despair. By morning, the plague spreads across the city, causing chaos and massive deaths. Ellen stays by Thomas, who is now gravely ill. Anna apologizes for not believing her earlier warnings. Dr. Wilhelm and Albin examine the infected bodies and realize the rats are unnatural. Albin insists this is not a disease but a curse and demands they find Nock. That night, Orlik performs a dark ritual, spreading his influence across the city. Thomas wakes in fevered terror, seeing visions of Orlik. Anna feels a presence watching her and turns to see Ellen standing silently, whispering for her to stay. Albin concludes that Visborg is facing an undead plague-bearer, Nosferatu. Ellen awakens from another nightmare and comes face to face with a dark, shadowed presence. A chilling voice tells her that she is not human, claiming it has been buried in darkness for centuries and that she has now awakened it. Orlik attempts to manipulate her again, falsely claiming that Thomas has signed divorce papers in exchange for gold. But Ellen sees through the deception and refuses to obey him. In response, Orlik threatens to kill Thomas. When Ellen awakens fully, she is met with a horrifying sight. Plague-infested rats have already overrun Anna, and she is dying. Ellen screams in shock and grief as the infection spreads rapidly through Visborg, forcing the entire city into quarantine. Anna, now barely alive, shows symptoms of the plague while Friedrich stays by her side in her final moments. After she dies, Friedrich leaves and confronts Ellen, still refusing to believe a supernatural force is behind the tragedy. Instead, he blames Ellen and Thomas for the outbreak and demands they leave Visborg immediately. Furious at his ignorance, Ellen storms away. Meanwhile, in Nock's abandoned office, Albin discovers an ancient symbol etched into the walls, an omen predicting the arrival of Nosferatu. Ellen and Thomas return home, but their reunion is tense. Thomas begs Ellen to leave the cursed city, but she refuses, revealing a devastating truth. Long before marrying Thomas, she had summoned the devil and formed a forbidden bond with the entity. She claims they were once connected as lovers in darkness, and her marriage to Thomas broke that connection. Thomas is shocked and confronts her about the strange documents he was forced to sign. Their argument escalates, but before Ellen can explain further, she suddenly convulses. Her body stiffens, her voice changes, and Nosferatu takes control of her once again. Possessed, she stops Thomas from leaving and commands him to stay. Overpowered by the force, Thomas is forced into submission. Afterward, Ellen collapses, regaining consciousness as if waking from a nightmare she cannot remember. That night, Orlik reveals his full cruelty by attacking Friedrich's household and slaughtering his children. Devastated and broken, Friedrich is left in unbearable grief as he buries his family, finally accepting that Nosferatu is real. With no other option left, von Franz proposes a final plan. He, Dr. Wilhelm, and Thomas will locate the vampire's resting place and destroy him. Based on his occult research, von Franz reveals that Nosferatu can only be defeated through the willing sacrifice of a pure woman. Ellen is identified as the only one who fits this role. Overwhelmed by madness and grief, Friedrich succumbs to despair and commits a horrifying act before eventually falling victim to the plague himself. When the others arrive, he is already dead. With no choice left, his body and the remains of his family are burned. Determined to end the nightmare, the remaining men prepare for their final mission. The expedition continues as Ellen, now fully aware of her fate, willingly summons Orlik to her chamber, accepting what is to come. Meanwhile, Thomas and the others finally locate Orlik's resting place. Thomas approaches the coffin cautiously, blade in hand. Taking a deep breath, he lifts the lid and strikes down, but shock hits instantly when they realize the truth. The coffin is empty. Instead, they find Nock inside, grinning darkly, revealing that they were never on the real trail. It was all a diversion. Realizing the trap, Thomas immediately rushes back to save Ellen. At the same time, von Franz begins reciting ancient prayers and sets the crypt ablaze, attempting to destroy whatever remains of Orlick's influence. Back at the manor, Orlick finally arrives to claim Ellen. She stands waiting in her bridal attire, calm and resolute, fully accepting her fate. As he recites the ritual, she surrenders completely, allowing him to feed on her and complete their unholy union. But as dawn breaks, something changes. Orlick suddenly feels a weakening in his body. His immortal form begins to decay, his flesh withering as he realizes something has gone wrong. He lets out a tormented scream as his body collapses into dust, his existence unraveling completely in Ellen's arms. Moments later, Thomas arrives breathless, only to find Ellen dying. She looks at him one last time, her strength fading as she quietly slips away. Thomas holds her hand tightly as she takes her final breath. With her sacrifice complete, the plague that consumed Visborg finally comes to an end. The darkness lifts, and silence returns to the city. The nightmare is over. The screen fades to black. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like, subscribe, and press the bell icon so you never miss any upcoming videos. See you in the next one, take care.